May 12th, 1945, 06:45 hours, Wilhelmshaven Naval Base, Pier 7. Kapitänleutnant Erich Topp stood in the pre-dawn darkness, staring at the submarine that represented Germany's last technical miracle. U-2511, Type 21. The electroboot. Behind him, 200 kilometers to the west, American armored columns were advancing through the Ruhr. To the east, Soviet artillery pounded Berlin's outer defenses. The Reich had perhaps 72 hours left, and German Naval Command had given him 6 hours to test whether this machine could explain the mystery that had haunted him for 18 months. The written order was brief. Kapitänleutnant Topp will conduct abbreviated operational assessment of Type 21 detection vulnerability. Report findings by 1300 hours. Priority: communication security protocols. Topp had read that last line 3 times. Communication security protocols, not speed trials, not diving depth, not torpedo systems. They wanted to know about radios. At 42 years old, with 35 Allied ships sunk and the Knight's Cross with oak leaves pinned to his tunic, Topp understood what that meant. Someone at Kriegsmarine headquarters had finally asked the question he'd been asking since September 1943. How were the Allies finding them so quickly after every radio transmission? If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The Type 21 represented everything German submarine engineering could achieve. Streamlined hull, optimized for submerged operation. Battery capacity is triple that of Type 7 boats, 17 knots underwater, faster submerged than surfaced. Silent running capability that rendered Allied sonar useless. Hydraulic torpedo reload in 12 minutes versus 20+ manual. 280-meter operating depth versus 200 for Type 7. On paper, it solved every tactical problem that had made U-boat warfare suicidal by 1944. But Topp carried a suspicion that no amount of engineering excellence could solve. What if the Allies weren't hunting submarines by detecting them? What if they were hunting submarines by listening to them talk? Topp had joined the Kriegsmarine in 1934, transferred to U-boat service 1937. By 1940, he commanded U-552. His combat record was exceptional. 35 merchant ships sunk, nearly 200,000 gross registered tons. Knight's Cross, awarded December 1941. Oak Leaves, August 1942. By age 30, he was among Germany's most decorated submarine commanders. But Topp wasn't just a warrior. He was an observer. His patrol reports contained detailed operational analysis. Kriegsmarine intelligence officers studied Topp's observations for strategic patterns. He had witnessed the evolution of Allied anti-submarine warfare from primitive to devastating. 1941, individual escorts, basic sonar, depth charges requiring visual contact. U-boats dominated the Atlantic. Merchant shipping losses exceeded 600,000 tons monthly. Britain's supply lifeline was failing. 1942, coordinated escort groups, improved radar, hedgehog forward-throwing weapons, still manageable with wolfpack tactics. U-boats operated in groups, overwhelming convoy defenses through coordinated attacks. 1943. Everything changed. Escort carriers providing air cover, centimetric radar undetectable by German warning receivers, acoustic homing torpedoes. Every patrol became a survival exercise. U-boat life expectancy dropped from 14 months in 1941 to 4 months by 1944. Nearly 75% of the crew died. Topp survived through tactical discipline, crew training, and statistical luck. He'd watched 40+ fellow commanders die, many trained with, men whose families he knew. He understood viscerally what headquarters viewed as casualty statistics. But 3 encounters stood apart, 3 moments when Allied forces appeared with precision, suggesting something beyond improved equipment or tactical evolution. September 15th, 1943. 23:47 hours. North Atlantic, 52 degrees 18 minutes north, 28 degrees, 35 minutes west. U-552 attacked convoy on 202. Standard approach. Submerged. Night attack. 4 torpedoes fired. 1 British merchant vessel sunk. Top immediately ordered an emergency dive. Silent running at 120 meters depth. Radio silence is absolute. No transmissions, no active sonar. The submarine became a hole in the ocean. 18 minutes later, 3 British destroyers converged on his exact position, not searching, not following expanding search patterns, converging directly, as if they'd calculated his precise location and predicted his escape vector. At the time, Topp blamed a breach in radio discipline. Perhaps a crew member had transmitted without authorization. Perhaps his radio operator had made an error. He'd filed a formal report noting possible communications compromise. March 7th, 1944, 14:20 hours, Bay of Biscay. 47 degrees, 15 minutes north, 6 degrees, 40 minutes west. U-552 was transiting, submerged, using schnorkel breathing tube. Careful operation, only 20 centimeters of mast exposed above surface. Minimal radar cross-section, no radio transmissions for 6 hours. Allied patrol aircraft appeared overhead within 30 minutes. No search pattern, no expanding spiral. Flew directly to his position, as if guided by precise coordinates. At the time, Topp blamed schnorkel wake visibility. Perhaps the breathing tube created a detectable disturbance. Perhaps diesel exhaust was visible from altitude. He'd filed a report recommending schnorkel design modifications. November 3rd, 1944, 0:15 hours. Western approaches, 51 degrees, 40 minutes north, 12 degrees, 20 minutes west. U-552 pursued a damaged freighter. Topp ordered a dive to 180 meters beyond normal depth charge range. Silent running. No transmissions. He waited for the damaged vessel's escorts to pass. Hedgehog anti-submarine mortars fell in perfect pattern around his position. Contact detonators, multiple hull impacts, forced emergency surface and retreat. At the time, Topp blamed acoustic homing weapons. Perhaps British torpedoes had acquired his propeller signature. Perhaps sonar had improved beyond German intelligence estimates. He'd filed a report recommending deeper operating protocols. 3 incidents, 3 different explanations, 3 moments of extraordinary bad luck. But standing on Pier 7 at 06:45 hours, May 12th, 1945, staring at a submarine with perfect specifications, Topp allowed himself to consider an alternative. What if there hadn't been a communications breach in September 43? What if there hadn't been wake visibility in March 44? What if there hadn't been acoustic homing in November 44? What if instead there had been a system, invisible, comprehensive, predictive, a system he'd been fighting for 18 months without ever knowing it existed? The Type 21 fixed every tactical vulnerability: faster speed, greater depth, better stealth, superior endurance. But if the Allies had built something that bypassed tactics entirely, then engineering perfection was irrelevant. 0700 hours. Topp climbed down through U-511's forward hatch. The control room impressed him immediately. Spacious, compared to Type 7's cramped quarters, rational equipment layout, modern instrumentation. The crew, 32 men, versus Type 7's 44, looked impossibly young, average age 19. None had combat experience. They'd never faced Allied anti-submarine warfare. They didn't understand what they were about to test. Topp conducted a rapid systems inspection: diving planes, hydraulic operation, single operator controlling bow and stern simultaneously, torpedo systems, fully automated hydraulic loading, electrical firing control, battery banks, 372 cells, triple Type 7 capacity, schnorkel system, indefinite submerged transit capability, sonar, passive hydrophones, detecting targets at 50+ kilometers. Everything was perfect, but perfection wasn't what Topp had come to evaluate. At 07:15, Topp addressed the radio operator, a thin 19-year-old named Becker who'd completed training 3 weeks earlier. Have you operated Kriegsmarine communication protocols under combat conditions? Topp asked. No, Herr Kapitänleutnant. Only training exercises. Do you know what happens when you transmit a radio message? The message is encoded and sent to the U-boat command, Herr Kapitänleutnant. What else happens? Becker, hesitant. Nothing else, Herr Kapitänleutnant. Topp nodded slowly. The boy had no idea. None of them did. The Kriegsmarine had trained them on equipment operation, but hadn't explained why submarine life expectancy had collapsed to 4 months. Today, we're going to test something, Topp said. Every time we transmit, we're going to record the exact time and position. We're going to monitor the Allied response. We're going to measure how quickly they find us. The crew exchanged glances. This wasn't standard evaluation protocol. 0730 hours. U-2511, cast off. Wilhelmshaven Harbour. Calm conditions. Visibility 10 kilometers. Surface transit to open water. At 0755, position 53 degrees 42 minutes north, 7 degrees 55 minutes east. Clear of harbour approaches. Time to dive. Prepare to dive. All stations are secure for diving. Hydraulics. Closed main vents in 18 seconds versus 35 to 40 seconds for manual Type 7 systems. The boat tilted downward, smooth and controlled. 0757 hours. U-2511 leveled at 50 meters depth. Total dive time, 2 minutes 5 seconds. Type 7s required 4+ minutes. That 2-minute advantage meant survival when aircraft attacked. But in September 43, destroyers had arrived in 18 minutes anyway. 2 minutes meant nothing if the Allies knew where to look. 0810 hours. Submerged speed trials. All ahead full, maximum performance. The electric motors hummed. Speed indicator climbed. 8 knots, 12 knots, 15 knots, 17.2 knots. Revolutionary. Type 7. Submerged speed. Maxed at 7 to 8 knots. Sustainable for 30 to 45 minutes before battery depletion. Type 21, maintained 17+ knots for 90 minutes, then 12 to 14 knots for hours. The tactical implications were extraordinary. Could outrun most surface escorts, could rapidly reposition between attacks, could escape contact without surfacing. In 1940 or 1941, this would have made U-boats nearly unstoppable. But in September 1943, 3 destroyers had converged on him in 18 minutes, not chasing, converging, as if they'd calculated his destination before he arrived. 0845 hours. Time for the real test. Topp ordered reduced speed to 6 knots, silent running, depth 60 meters. Radio operator, prepare test transmission, encoded message to U-boat command, standard convoy, contact report format, fictional data. Becker looked uncertain. Herr Kapitänleutnant, shall I indicate this is a test transmission? No. Send it exactly as combat protocol. I want to see if anyone is listening. Becker encoded the message. Fictional convoy position. Fictional ship. Count, fictional course and speed, standard format used hundreds of times daily across the Atlantic. Ready to transmit, Herr Kapitänleutnant. Topp checked his watch. 0852 hours. Transmit. The radio burst lasted 4 seconds. Short frequency transmission, exactly as combat doctrine required. Maximum information in minimum time to reduce detection risk. Transmission complete. Herr Kapitänleutnant. Mark the time. 0852 and 20 seconds. Sonar operator, maintain continuous watch. Report any change in surface contact patterns. Hydrophone operator, monitor for aircraft. The crew waited. 5 minutes passed. 10 minutes. 15 minutes. At 0911 hours, 19 minutes after transmission, the sonar operator spoke. Surface contact, bearing 340 degrees. Range 12 kilometers. Single vessel, high-speed screws, destroyer class. Topp felt ice in his chest. 19 minutes from radio transmission to destroyer arrival. Track contact. Report course and speed. 3 minutes of calculation. Contact on direct intercept course. Herr Kapitänleutnant. Speed 25 knots. Time to closest approach 18 minutes. There it was. 18 minutes. The same interval from September 1943. Not coincidence. Not random patrol pattern. Precise response to radio transmission. Communications officer, did U-boat command acknowledge our transmission? No acknowledgement yet, Herr Kapitänleutnant. How long should acknowledgement take? Typically 30 to 45 minutes for encoding and relay, Herr Kapitänleutnant. So, U-boat command hadn't even processed the message yet, but somehow a British destroyer was already intercept course. The destroyer wasn't responding to German command's orders. It was responding to Topp's transmission directly. Come to course 180, depth 100 meters, silent running. Let's see what they do. U-511 turned south and descended. The destroyer maintained pursuit. At 0935 hours, the destroyer passed directly overhead. Topp heard the propeller sounds through the hull. Heavy warship screws. The destroyer began dropping depth charges and expanding pattern around the transmission location. But U-511 was already 1,000 meters away. The Type 21's 17-knot sprint capability had created separation impossible for Type 7 boats. The depth charges detonated harmlessly. 200 meters depth, U-511 sat at 120 meters. Safe. The technology worked perfectly. Speed and depth advantage allowed escape. But the fundamental problem remained. The destroyer had arrived 18 minutes after transmission. It had known exactly where to look. 0950 hours. Topp ordered return to schnorkel depth. Time for test number 2. At 10:15 hours, U-511 ran at schnorkel depth, 15 meters, diesel engines drawing air through retractable mast. Only 20 centimeters of mast exposed above surface, minimal radar signature. This was how Type 21s would patrol the Atlantic indefinitely submerged. Radio operator, prepare second test transmission, different frequency, different message format, weather report protocol. Another 4-second burst, 10:17 hours. Transmission complete. Topp waited. 12 minutes later, the hydrophone operator reported aircraft engine noise. Aircraft approaching, bearing 090. Range 8 kilometers. 14 minutes from transmission to aircraft arrival, even faster than the destroyer. Emergency dive, 200 meters. Silent running. U-511 dropped rapidly. The aircraft passed overhead, no attack. The aircraft couldn't detect a submarine at 200 meters, but it had appeared at exactly the transmission location within 14 minutes. 2 transmissions, 2 Allied responses, 18 minutes and 14 minutes. The pattern was undeniable. At 1100 hours, Topp ordered the crew to surface stations. U-511 rose to periscope depth. Topp raised the observation scope and swept the horizon. Empty ocean. No contacts. He lowered the periscope and turned to his executive officer, a 30-year-old veteran named Hartmann who'd survived 2 years of Atlantic warfare. "Your assessment?" Topp asked. Hartmann's expression was grim. "They're tracking our transmissions, Herr Kapitänleutnant. Somehow they know exactly where we are within minutes of any radio use." "How?" "I don't know, but it explains everything. Every patrol where Allied forces appeared impossibly fast. Every encounter we blamed on bad luck. It wasn't luck. They were listening." Topp nodded. 18 months of suspicion confirmed in 2 simple tests. The Allies had built a system that tracked radio transmissions. Every time a U-boat reported convoy positions to headquarters, Allied forces calculated the transmission source and dispatched hunter groups. Mathematics defeated mobility. Radio waves traveled at the speed of light. A 4-second transmission provided enough data for triangulation. Multiple listening stations measured signal direction. Simple geometry calculated intersection point. Destroyers and aircraft proceeded directly to calculated positions. The Type 21 could outrun destroyers. It could outdive depth charges. It could hide from sonar, but it couldn't outrun light-speed triangulation. Topp had spent 6 hours discovering what 18 months of combat should have revealed. The Allies had won the Battle of the Atlantic not by building better weapons, but by building a better system. They called it HFDF, high-frequency direction finding, HFDF in Allied naval slang. German naval intelligence knew HFDF existed. They'd captured Allied equipment. They'd interrogated prisoners, but they'd underestimated its effectiveness. They'd assumed it provided approximate bearings, rough locations, requiring extensive search operations. They were wrong. HFDF provided precise coordinates. Multiple shore stations and ship-mounted receivers simultaneously measured signal direction. Triangulation calculated exact position within seconds. The system covered the entire Atlantic. Every transmission from every U-boat created a precise target marker for Allied hunter groups. Topp understood the mathematics. If 3 shore stations detected a transmission, each measuring signal direction to within 2 degrees accuracy, triangulation provided position accuracy within 5 kilometers. 5 kilometers was nothing. A destroyer group at 25 knots covered 5 kilometers in 12 minutes. Aircraft at 300 kilometers per hour covered 5 kilometers in 1 minute. Every wolfpack coordination required radio communication. Pack leader transmitted convoy position. Individual boats reported attack results. U-boat command issued tactical orders. Each transmission created a target marker. The more communications, the more precise the targeting. Germany's tactical doctrine depended on coordinated attacks. Wolfpack tactics required constant communication between boats and headquarters. Every communication compromised position. The doctrine itself had become suicidal. 11:30 hours. Topp ordered return to Wilhelmshaven. He had enough data. The Type 21 was perfect. HFDF made perfection irrelevant. During the transit back, Topp reviewed what he'd learned. The pattern was comprehensive and devastating. September 1943, U-552 attacked convoy, transmitted attack report to U-boat command, Allied shore stations, triangulated transmission within seconds, calculated probable escape vector. Based on standard U-boat doctrine, destroyers converged on predicted position. Arrival time, 18 minutes. March 1944, U-552, transiting Bay of Biscay, using schnorkel, maintained radio silence for 6 hours, then transmitted routine position report, Allied shore stations, triangulated transmission, aircraft dispatched to intercept, arrival time 30 minutes. November 1944, U-552, pursuing damaged freighter, transmitted target update to U-boat command, Allied shore stations, triangulated transmission, destroyer calculated probable attack position, laid hedgehog pattern based on standard U-boat approach doctrine, force surface and retreat. 3 encounters, not 3 moments of bad luck. 3 demonstrations of systematic Allied superiority. HFDF detected transmission location. Allied operational doctrine predicted U-boat behavior. Coordination between shore stations, aircraft, and surface vessels ensured weapons arrived at predicted positions. Topp had blamed radio discipline, schnorkel visibility, acoustic homing. All wrong. The real enemy had been invisible. Radio triangulation operating at the speed of light. The implications were catastrophic for German submarine warfare. Type 21 specifications solved every tactical problem. Faster speed, greater depth, better stealth, superior endurance. But none of those advantages mattered against HFDF. Lightspeed triangulation defeated mechanical performance. Wolfpack tactics required coordination. Coordination required radio communication. Radio communication created target markers. The tactical doctrine Germany had perfected by 1942 had become a death sentence by 1943. 12:45 hours. U-2511 entered Wilhelmshaven harbor. Topp ordered the crew to secure all stations. He proceeded directly to headquarters to file his report. At 1300 hours, Topp sat across from Kapitän Müller, Chief of Submarine Operations, Western Baltic. Müller was 56, career naval officer, veteran of the First World War. He'd spent 4 years managing submarine deployment from headquarters. He'd never commanded combat patrol. Topp handed over his written assessment. Müller read in silence. 3 minutes, then he looked up. You conducted 2 radio transmissions and measured Allied response time. Yes, Herr Kapitän. 18 minutes for surface vessel response, 14 minutes for aircraft response. And you believe this demonstrates Allied direction-finding capability? Not capability, Herr Kapitän. Systematic coverage. The entire Atlantic is monitored. Every transmission creates a target marker. Allied forces respond with precision, suggesting automated coordination. Müller set down the report. The Type 21's performance? Perfect, Herr Kapitän. Speed, depth, stealth, endurance. All specifications exceeded expectations. The boat is revolutionary. Then your conclusion seems contradictory. Revolutionary submarine defeated by radio direction finding. Topp chose his words carefully. The Type 21 solves tactical problems, Herr Kapitän. HFDF is not a tactical system. It's a strategic system. It converts our communication requirements into targeting data. Every radio transmission becomes an attack opportunity for Allied forces. Then we modify radio protocols. Shorter transmissions, lower power, different frequencies. Respectfully, Herr Kapitän, I tested different frequencies and message formats. Allied response time was consistent. They're not detecting specific frequencies. They're triangulating any high-frequency transmission. Physics determines detection range, not our protocol modifications. Müller was quiet for a moment. Then, what do you recommend? Radio silence, Herr Kapitän. Complete radio silence. Independent patrol operations without coordination. That eliminates wolfpack tactics. Yes, Herr Kapitän. Individual Type 21s, operating independently, would have limited effectiveness against convoys with 50-plus merchant ships and 20 escort vessels. Yes, Herr Kapitän, but individual Type 21s, operating independently, would survive longer than wolfpacks that transmit positions every 6 hours. Müller stood and walked to the window overlooking the harbour. U-2 511 sat at Pier 7. Perfect engineering. Wrong war. Your report will be forwarded to Admiral Dönitz, Müller said finally. He will determine operational protocols. Topp stood. Herr Kapitän, permission to speak freely. Müller nodded. For 2 years we blamed losses on improved Allied technology. Better radar, better sonar, better depth charges. We built the Type 21 to counter those improvements. But the real problem wasn't technology. It was that we were fighting a system we didn't understand. HFDF converted our communication into Allied intelligence. Every transmission told them exactly where to look. We spent 2 years optimizing submarine design while they spent 2 years optimizing Atlantic coverage. We built better weapons. They built better mathematics. Müller turned from the window. And now, May 12th, 1945. What difference does understanding make? Topp had no answer. The war was ending. Soviet forces were inside Berlin. American forces had reached the Elbe. Understanding HFDF now was like understanding why the Titanic sank after it had already settled on the ocean floor. Dismissed, Kapitänleutnant. Topp returned to U-2 511. The crew was securing the boat for standby status. They'd completed their first and only patrol. 6 hours. 2 radio transmissions, 0 combat engagements. They didn't understand what they'd proven. Hartmann approached. Orders, Herr Kapitänleutnant? Standby status. We wait. For what? For the war to end. May 14th, 1945. Topp received orders transferring U-2 511 to Norway. Submarines were being consolidated at Norwegian bases to avoid capture by advancing Soviet forces. The transit would take 3 days. May 15th. U-2 511 departed Wilhelmshaven, surface transit through Kattegat and Skagerrak. No Allied interference. The Royal Navy was focused on accepting surrenders, not hunting submarines. May 17th. Arrival Bergen, Norway. 12. Type 21. Submarines were already present. Perfect boats, perfect technology, 0 combat effectiveness. Combined, they'd completed perhaps 60 hours of operational patrols. Combined, they'd sunk 0 Allied ships. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. May 18th, Admiral Dönitz transmitted general order to all U-boat commanders. Cease offensive operations, await surrender protocols, maintain dignity, honor the service of those who didn't survive. Topp read the order to U-2511's crew. Silence in the control room. 4 years of war, 35 ships sunk for Topp personally, 800,000 tons of Allied shipping destroyed by German submarines in 1942 alone. And now, surrender. But Topp understood something the young crew didn't. The war hadn't been lost in May 1945. It had been lost in 1943 when HFDF coverage became comprehensive across the Atlantic. Every month from May 1943 forward, German submarine losses exceeded production. May 43, 41 boats lost. June 43, 17 boats lost, but operational effectiveness destroyed. By November 1943, U-boat life expectancy had dropped to 4 months. The mathematics were simple and brutal. Monthly production, 8 to 10 boats. Monthly losses, 10 to 15 boats. Even with the Type 21, even with revolutionary technology, production couldn't replace losses fast enough. America had built an industrial system that made submarine warfare obsolete through systematic coverage rather than technological superiority. HFDF wasn't revolutionary technology. It was adequate technology, deployed comprehensively. Shore-based listening stations required basic radio receivers and trained operators. Cost per station, perhaps $50,000. By 1944, Allied forces operated 70-plus stations, covering the entire Atlantic. Ship-mounted HFDF systems required slightly more sophisticated equipment, but still used 1930 technology. Cost per system, perhaps $20,000. By 1944, most convoy escorts carried HFDF receivers. The total investment in Atlantic HFDF coverage was perhaps $10 million. For $10 million, the Allies had built a system that neutralized Germany's $2 billion submarine fleet. Germany had built 118 Type 21s at approximately 8 million marks per boat. Total investment, 944 million marks, roughly $300 million at 1945 exchange rates. $300 million in submarines, defeated by $10 million in radio direction finding. The cost ratio was 30 to 1. Every dollar invested in HFDF neutralized $30 of German submarine investment. Topp had spent his career optimizing combat tactics, approach angles, torpedo spread patterns, escape procedures, all irrelevant because the Allies had optimized industrial systems, build adequate equipment in overwhelming quantities, deploy comprehensive coverage, ensure every German communication created targeting data. May 23rd, 1945. British naval officers arrived in Bergen to accept formal submarine surrenders. They inspected the Type 21s with professional interest. One Royal Navy commander, perhaps 45 years old, career officer, examined U-2511's control room. "When did the boat become operational?" he asked. "April 30th, Topp replied. "You had 2 weeks of war." "Yes." The British commander examined the streamlined hull, the battery compartments, the hydraulic torpedo systems. "If you'd had 300 of these in 1942, you'd have won the Atlantic." Topp shook his head. "No, Commander. If we'd had 300 of these in 1942, you would have built more HFDF stations and more escort carriers. The outcome would have been the same. We could build better submarines. You could build better coverage. Coverage wins because it scales faster than quality." The commander considered this. "HFDF. Yes, you were tracking our radio transmissions, triangulating positions. Every communication we sent became targeting data for your forces." The commander's expression didn't change, but Topp saw recognition. "When did you determine this?" "May 12th. 6-hour evaluation patrol. I transmitted twice and measured your response time. 18 minutes for destroyers, 14 minutes for aircraft. And before May 12th, I suspected for 18 months, 3 encounters where your forces appeared impossibly fast. I blame bad luck until I tested the pattern systematically. The commander nodded slowly. Most U-boat commanders never understood. They blamed improved radar or better sonar. You're one of the few who identified the actual system. Understanding doesn't change outcomes, Commander. We lost because you built systematic coverage while we built individual excellence. By the time I understood HFDF, the war was already over. The British inspection team spent 3 days examining Type 21 submarines. They photographed everything, measured every specification, interviewed crew members about operational procedures. The intelligence value was extraordinary. Post-war, every major submarine navy, British, American, Soviet, French, copied Type 21 innovations. Streamlined hulls became standard. High-capacity battery systems became standard. Schnorkel systems became standard. Hydraulic torpedo loading became standard. But they also copied the lesson Topp had learned in 6 hours. Radio communication during combat operations was suicide. Post-war submarine doctrine emphasized radio silence, independent operations, minimal communication. The Cold War submarine, forces that descended from Type 21 design, operated under protocols specifically designed to defeat HFDF. Nuclear propulsion eliminated schnorkel requirements. Longer patrols reduced communication frequency. Satellite communication replaced high-frequency radio when possible. The Type 21 influenced submarine design for 70 years. But HFDF influenced submarine doctrine forever. For Topp, personally, the 6 hours aboard U-2511 represented the culmination of 4 years of combat experience. Everything he'd learned, every tactic he'd perfected, every patrol he'd survived, compressed into one revelation. The Allies hadn't defeated Germany by building better submarines or training better crews or developing superior tactics. They'd defeated Germany by building a system that made submarines discoverable through their own communication requirements. Wolfpack tactics required coordination. Coordination required radio transmission. Radio transmission created HFDF target markers. The more effective German tactics became, the more vulnerable they were to systematic Allied response. Germany's tactical excellence had become strategic liability. Every refinement in Wolfpack coordination increased radio traffic. Every increase in radio traffic provided more HFDF targeting data. By 1943, German submarine doctrine was actively helping Allied hunter groups find and destroy U-boats. Topp had optimized himself into a trap. His tactical precision, his coordination discipline, his careful reporting of convoy positions, all of it had been feeding data into Allied HFDF networks that converted German professionalism into target markers. The irony was profound. Germany's most decorated submarine commanders were most vulnerable because they followed doctrine most carefully. Less disciplined commanders who ignored radio protocols and operated independently had better survival rates. By May 1945, Topp understood that he'd spent 2 years fighting an invisible enemy while believing he was fighting destroyers and aircraft. The real enemy had been mathematics, triangulation geometry, signal propagation, physics, Allied coordination protocols that ensured weapons arrived at calculated positions within minutes of any transmission. The Type 21 couldn't solve that problem because it wasn't a submarine problem. It was a doctrine problem. As long as Germany required radio coordination, HFDF made submarines discoverable. The only solution was operational independence, which eliminated Wolfpack effectiveness. Germany had 2 choices by 1943. Maintain Wolfpack tactics and accept catastrophic losses from HFDF targeting, or abandon Wolfpack tactics and accept reduced effectiveness against heavily escorted convoys. Either choice led to strategic defeat. The Type 21 arrived too late to matter because by 1945, submarine warfare itself had become obsolete against comprehensive Allied coverage, not just HFDF, escort carriers providing continuous air patrol, centimetric radar, detecting schnorkel masts, acoustic homing torpedoes, hedgehog forward-throwing mortars, coordinated hunter-killer groups. Each system alone was manageable. Combined, They created coverage so comprehensive that submarine survival became statistical improbability. By 1944, average U-boat survival was 1.8 patrols. Most crews died on their second patrol. Topp had survived 12 patrols through a combination of tactical discipline and extraordinary luck. He'd beaten statistical odds that should have killed him 8 patrols earlier. Standing aboard U-511 in May 1945, he finally understood why those odds had been so brutal. May 28, 1945. Topp was formally relieved of command. U-511 was transferred to British custody. The submarine would be taken to Lisa Halley, Northern Ireland, for detailed technical examination. British naval intelligence would spend 6 months studying every system, every innovation, every design choice. Topp watched from the dock as British crew brought U-511 out of Bergen Harbour. And it was the submarine that represented Germany's last technical miracle was leaving under enemy flag. Perfect engineering, perfect specifications, zero combat effectiveness. He thought about the order he'd received. May 12th, 6 hours to evaluate Type 21 detection vulnerability with emphasis on communication security protocols. Someone at Kriegsmarine headquarters had finally asked the right question. But asking the right question in May 1945 was like asking why the dam failed after the valley had already flooded. If that question had been asked in May 1943, when HFDF coverage first became comprehensive, Germany might have adapted, abandoned wolfpack tactics, implemented radio silence protocols, accepted reduced effectiveness in exchange for improved survival. But May 1943 was also the month Germany commissioned the Type 21 program, 2 years, to design, test, and build revolutionary submarines to solve tactical problems. 0 years to analyze whether tactical problems were actually strategic problems requiring doctrinal solutions rather than engineering solutions. Germany had spent 944 million marks building better submarines. The Allies had spent $10 million making submarines discoverable through their own communication. Engineering genius defeated by systematic deployment of adequate technology. Topp understood this with absolute clarity, standing on Bergen Dock, watching U-511 disappear. For 4 years, he'd been fighting with one hand, while the other hand unconsciously signaled his position to the enemy. Every radio transmission, every convoy report, every tactical coordination, all of it converted by HFDF into targeting data. The Type 21 could dive deeper, run faster, hide better, but it couldn't escape the fundamental requirement that submarines operating in wolf packs needed to communicate. And communication created HFDF target markers regardless of submarine quality. June 2nd, 1945. Topp received orders transferring him to British POW processing. He would spend 6 months in Allied custody answering technical questions about U-boat operations. Intelligence officers would interview him extensively about tactics, training, doctrine. During those interviews, Topp would describe his May 12th evaluation patrol. 2 radio transmissions, 18-minute and 14-minute Allied response times, systematic HFDF coverage across the Atlantic. Allied intelligence officers would listen carefully, take detailed notes, and provide no confirmation about Allied systems. But years later, after classified material was declassified, Topp would learn the details. By 1944, the Allies operated 83 shore-based HFDF stations, average coverage, 1 station every 200 kilometers of Atlantic coastline. Detection range, per station, 500 to 800 kilometers, depending on atmospheric conditions. Overlapping coverage ensured every radio transmission was detected by minimum 3 stations. 3-bearing triangulation provided position accuracy within 5 kilometers. Shore stations transmitted coordinates to operations centers. Operations centers calculated submarine probable movement vectors based on doctrinal analysis. Destroyers and aircraft received targeting data within minutes. Standard response protocol: position 2 destroyer groups at probable escape vectors. Dispatch aircraft to transmission location. Maintain pressure for 6 to 12 hours. Statistical certainty suggested damaged submarines would surface within 12 hours or withdraw from operational area. The system processed approximately 400 U-boat transmissions weekly by 1944. Each transmission created targeting package distributed to Allied forces within 5 minutes. Response rate? 73%, meaning 73% of German radio transmissions resulted in Allied contact within 2 hours. That 73% response rate explained why U-boat life expectancy had collapsed to 4 months by 1944. Nearly 3/4 of all German radio transmissions created immediate Allied tactical response. Wolfpack operations requiring constant communication became suicide missions. Topp learned these statistics in 1952 when he was invited to review British naval histories for accuracy. He read the HFDF sections with grim recognition. Everything he'd suspected in May 1945 was confirmed with precise data. The Type 21 story wasn't about engineering failure. It was about systematic Allied superiority, defeating individual German excellence. Revolutionary submarine technology arriving in an operational environment where radio communication had become tactical suicide. If U-2511 had become operational in June 1942, before comprehensive HFDF coverage, Topp believed it would have been devastatingly effective. 17 knots submerged speed, 280-meter diving depth, indefinite schnorkel endurance against 1942 convoy defenses, nearly unstoppable. But June 1942 was also when Allied cryptographers broke German naval enigma codes. German submarine positions were being read from intercepted and decoded messages. HFDF was being deployed to supplement code breaking. Escort carriers were entering service. The window when Type 21 could have been decisive was perhaps 6 months, January to June 1942. After June 42, Allied anti-submarine systems were evolving faster than German submarine technology. By May 1945, that window had closed. Type 21 represented perfect engineering answer to wrong question. The question wasn't how to build better submarines. The question was whether submarines could survive in an operational environment with comprehensive Allied coverage. The answer Topp discovered in 6 hours was definitive. No, not through engineering excellence, not through tactical innovation, not through crew training. Individual excellence couldn't defeat systematic coverage. Germany built 118 Type 21s, 0 combat victories, 0 Allied ships sunk. The most advanced submarines in history completed perhaps 200 total patrol hours combined and accomplished nothing. Topp's 6-hour evaluation patrol represented approximately 3% of total Type 21 operational time. In those 6 hours, he'd confirmed what 4 years of Atlantic warfare should have revealed. Radio communication made submarines discoverable. HFDF made discovery lethal. The Type 21 was perfect technology for doctrine that had become obsolete. Standing on Bergen Dock, June 2nd, 1945, waiting for transport to British custody, Topp thought about the 35 ships he'd sunk, 193,000 tons of Allied shipping destroyed. Knights cross with oak leaves. One of Germany's most successful submarine commanders, and none of it had mattered because while he'd been perfecting attack tactics, the Allies had been building HFDF networks that made attack tactics irrelevant. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.